Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. Mike Mallon here. I have with us today Lara Erlank, who is one of our amazing health coaches, and we're going to do another one of those podcasts in this series of Wild Health Voices. So Lara, can we start out, before I start asking you just those standard questions, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be with us here at Wild Health.
So about myself, I actually came to Wild Health through the CrossFit avenue. I decided to become a CrossFit enthusiast when in 2010, immediately became addicted, found myself becoming really competitive for doing that, became a CrossFit Games athlete, and a lot of other things were kind of happening at the same time. This was in Los Angeles, decided I didn't like to be in LA, moved off to Namibia, tried to kind of find my way again, and became an epidemiologist. So I went to grad school there. Decided I didn't want to be underground, but was certainly invested in health. So I came back to California and then didn't want to be an epidemiologist, didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to change lives and wanted to be part of being connected to seeing the change in people's lives versus just sitting underground studying changes that could potentially happen in the future. So I had that medical background, but was invested in the health. So I started actually managing Orange Theory fitness studios, but continued to do the CrossFit stuff, continued to be a competitive athlete, went to the CrossFit Games again. So I was really in that CrossFit world. And when we had that partnership coming up with Precision Care, we were looking for people who had the coaching background, people who were invested in CrossFit, and people who understood medical language. So it was kind of the perfect marriage. And then I had the connections with Julie Fouché to get into this position. So I was really lucky that the position came up during the time of the pandemic, and I wasn't too invested in trying to manage a whole bunch of closed Orange Theory studios.
That would have been tough. Did I hear that right? Did you say epidemiologist? I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So I that was for a short while. I was living in California, working as an EMT, taking night classes and working as a CrossFit coach. And then wanted to create change at a population level. I wanted to impact people kind of at a big scale versus just the people that I was seeing in that one-on-one environment or small group fitness environment. So going to South Africa, I thought that I was going to create change at a population level if I did public health, and became an epidemiologist, but I didn't actually realize how difficult it is to study what you want to study or to see what you do study create any change. So there's a lot of politics involved. I didn't get to study the things I wanted to study. I wanted to study over-the-counter drug abuse amongst working women in the Central Business District, and put a lot of time and effort into that, but didn't actually get to turn that into a journal. The only stuff that I really got to dive into with the funding that I needed was environmental health and risks of herbicide exposures amongst forestry workers, which is important to somebody, but it wasn't important to me. I mean, I can talk about herbicide exposures, and I can talk about the behavior risks, and I can talk about systemically why it is an issue, but I wasn't passionate about it. And if you're going to spend that much time looking at data, you probably want to be passionate about what you're looking at. So it wasn't going to be a good match.
And it seems like a natural transition then to, sort of realize, hey, I want to see change in the people that I work with faster. So you found yourself in CrossFit and Orange Theory, and then ultimately with us as a health coach, where, presumably you get to see change in people in a matter of weeks.
I think that also something, before I even found CrossFit, kind of part of my avenue into CrossFit in the first place was I went to UCLA with the intention of being a chemical engineer, and I was good at chemistry. Chemistry's cool, but I wasn't that interested in chemistry beyond the fact that I like patterns and I like structure and I like things to be logical.
Right.
So I found myself taking a bunch of random general education classes, basically as many classes as I could take because there was so many things I wanted to learn about, and started taking psychology classes and then health psychology classes. And at the time, I wasn't allowed to work in the States because, in case anybody hasn't noticed, I have an accent, not actually from here. But so I could do it as credits was to be a lab assistant in the health psychology lab. So I got really, really interested in the sort of physiology that we see with psychology. So I was studying stress and upper respiratory syndrome, stress and skin barrier recovery. So basically looking at how cells are impacted by chronic versus acute stress. And I really thought going into grad school that I was going to take that avenue of looking at how stress, environment, and the things that we can and can't control, how that actually impacts us very much like at that sort of disease level. And yeah, then when you find out that you get funded to study herbicides, this wasn't it didn't match up.
Didn't quite work. Well, we share our realization that chemical engineering is not just chemistry and is not very much fun. I was a chemical engineer as well, and it didn't work for me either. All right, so let's jump to the next one. Tell us a little bit about what you were like when you were 20.
I was really into art. So throughout all of middle school, high school, college, that was really my, I don't know, how I spent my time, how I managed stress, how I expressed myself, where my passion was. So I saw myself as an artist, spent a good, 15 hours a week painting with oil paints. So that's how I spent most of my time. At the age of 20, I was probably, still doing the whole going out till 2 a.m. most nights of the week.
Most nights.
Myself as an athlete, I will tell you that. I was definitely, I was health conscious though. I was extremely health conscious, but somehow health did not include sleep. It did not include an awareness of balance at all. It was all about doing more, being always productive, and being extremely in what I would call orthorexic. Like everything was either good or bad into like nutrition. So it wasn't that I was not health conscious. I just had a very skewed idea of health and thought that I was somewhat invincible and that I could go out till 2 a.m. and get up at 5 a.m. and still had to get A's everything I did. That was me at 20.
So, I mean, some of us still feel that way. We're still, still don't recognize sleep's important. Still think, the more you do, the better.
The cheapest health hack is the hardest one to commit to.
Right. All right. So presumably you're a good sleeper now, or at least you focus on sleep. Give us some of your best hacks for sleeping and optimizing your sleep. I
would say for me, one of the big ones is to charge my phone away from my bed.
Love that one.
So when I find myself in a place where I am not sleeping well, the thing that always gets me is that when I go to bed, that's when I get to feel like I'm not having to put bandwidth into other things. So that's when I start browsing, just browsing whatever it is, whether I'm browsing Instagram, whether I'm reading up about some random health hack, or whether I am looking for the next Ironman event I want to sign up for. You go down the rabbit hole and you just 10 minutes turns into half an hour. So the phone is not allowed to be right next to my bed. That's a big one. I also am one of those people who will cover or turn off or remove every single light that there is. So if I go to a hotel, annoying because I have to unplug everything. And so there are no lights. I don't remember the last time I didn't sleep with earplugs. So I always sleep with earplugs. And I will always have a fan on, or aircon, but my room needs to be really cold. And I have my, so I'm very specific about my pillows, to the degree that if possible, I'll take them with me on my. So I am a side sleeper, so I have the firm pillow for like my head to stay there, but then I have a really puffy, big, soft pillow that I like to hug so that my shoulders don't end up crouching, so I don't get sore shoulders. And so I know I need to be really comfortable because muscles hurt when you're sleeping in an uncomfortable position, and then lights, sound, it's like a cave. I need to be completely disconnected.
So you travel with 2 bags, one for all your clothes and the other for your pillows.
Oh, my travel is terrible. I mean, I have my bag for all my clothes. I usually have my bike with me. And then I want to have all of my own bedding with me. And then not to mention that I bring all my own food with me. So, I mean, I am not the type of person that anybody wants to travel with.
All right, tell us a little bit. I know you've been competing in Ironmans for a while now. Tell us a little bit about how you stay fit and what your focus for your fitness is right now.
So at the moment, I am focusing primarily on the sort of middle distance Ironman events. So that's where my sort of passion is. I do spend probably about 2.5, maybe even 3 hours a day doing something fitness related. On weekends, it's more than that, depending on where I am in my season. It'll be anything from like 4 to 6 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. So it is a lot of time. On a lot of that is zone 2. So I am not crushing it like 7 days a week. I mean, not at all. Like, will have 2 challenging bike sessions and 1 challenging run session and 1 challenging swim session, but I am probably doing 2 sessions a day, and I am doing yoga 3 to 4 times a week. So yeah, there are some challenging things in there, but most of the time it is zone 2. It's just moving, and it's kind of like just moving and eating,
just
really.
Getting the body used to staying in that zone 2 all the time, so that there's as much mitochondria as possible squeezed into every single muscle fiber that you have, basically.
Yep, I'm practicing eating while moving. Digesting while running.
What's your biggest struggle when it comes to fitness? I mean, with that much exercise, there's got to be some struggles there.
I think that for me, it is to not overtrain or not overdo it. Sometimes there's also this sort of struggle sometimes where you feel like, if you're not doing something, am I able to do that? You can perform really well at an event, and then it's like I'll have this new barometer of, oh, I should be able to always run at that minute mile, because if I can do that minute mile for 13 miles, then why is it hard to do that for 10 miles? And to kind of let go of that sense of impermanence, where just because I'm not doing it today doesn't mean I'm not capable of it. And sometimes it's also difficult to distinguish between, is this a small little niggle that just you get because you're doing a billion reps every time you do a workout in one tiny little area, such a repetitive sport? Is this just a tiny niggle, or is this something I need to actually step back from and heal? So sometimes things will just hurt a little, and depending on what mood I'm in, is whether I want to be a hypochondriac or whether I feel like I need to, completely ignore it. And sometimes I want to completely ignore it when I really shouldn't ignore it. So I would say that historically, my biggest struggle has been to let my body heal, not always push it, and not always try to do my best at every single session. Like when you're doing zone 2 and just thinking, well, I could just do zone 3.
Just a few minutes in zone 3. Just maybe I'll do some intervals.
Like, no.
And just some zone 2 intervals, zone 4.
So that is definitely where I struggle the most, is to not do too much, and sometimes also to realize that it'll serve me better to just not do something than if, logistically speaking, it's going to be too challenging to incorporate. And I think that is probably kind of sad. Like, it's kind of sad to say, but that's probably been the most recent thing that I've been able to accept and learn, is that if it's going to be really difficult and challenging to do the run I want to do and drive out to San Francisco to do the ocean swim that I want to do, and logistically it's not going to work, it doesn't matter, versus trying to change everything and create all this stress just to do a session. Like, it doesn't mean that much. So yeah, dialing it down.
The attachment to each one of those particular exercises and recognizing it's a small part of the bigger whole makes a lot of sense. How do you use markers of recovery for to prevent overtraining, or to sort of direct the degree of your training?
So I do wear a Whoop. I've been wearing my Whoop since 2019. And I would say that there is a degree of recognizing that training goes through phases. Like, you need to overreach to be able to get an adaptation when you taper. So I'm not expecting myself to always be in the green per se. Like, I know that that's not actually going to serve me if sometimes I have to overreach to adapt. But certainly the trends, certainly to see whether it is trending down or whether it is trending up, and whether it is matching up with where I am with my training. So if my training is meant to be a phase where it's pushing me, then I expect that things are going to sort of take a bit of a dip, and I expect to get better after that. But if it's not matching up, then that's a conversation that I have. I have a coach as well, and we use a platform called Training Peaks, where he does all of my training, and he sees all of my data from my Whoop. He sees the data from my Garmin. He sees my training readiness scores. He sees my sleeping scores. And we are in constant conversation. I think it's fun for him to have someone who brings up those conversations and wants to always optimize and wants to use those numbers. So whether it's looking at whether my VO2 max on my watch, which is not the best marker because it's really just based on the performance of that day, and if you don't push a VO2 max, then you're not going to get a VO2 max, but it's still an indicator. So we'll look at something like that. We'll look at the body battery balance. We'll look at my sleep quality, whether my sleep quality is getting better or worse in terms of stress on my system. And we'll look at HRB, we'll look at breathing rate, and all of that helps us just navigate whether I am in line with where I want to be in line when it comes to training. And more often than not, it's probably the nutrition and the sleep more than it is the training volume that is impacting.
Perfect segue. Tell us a little bit about your diet right now and what the perfect diet is for you.
So it is a constant struggle for me to get into a place where I'm eating as many carbohydrates as I want to be eating. Simply because I think that has been a sort of like historically has not really been where I've come from. So I've always had a bit of a Mediterranean style diet. I did find out that I have sort of a pretty strong gluten sensitivity. So that's out. I mean, processed food is, I haven't been to McDonald's since I was like 12 years old. So I'm not exactly a processed food type of person anyway. So that wasn't a challenge. But for me now, I try to have most of my carbohydrates in the morning because that's when I do most of my training, and most of my carbohydrates in general close to my training. I'm typically having at least sort of like 10 to 40 grams of protein per meal. I hit about 160 grams of protein in a day. But I would say for me, the biggest part now is getting all those carbs. They are coming from sweet potato, quinoa, brown rice. And then in training, that's when I'll have things like the Morton's Goose or the Morton's, sugar, whatever stuff.
Yeah.
Cliff Blocks.
Yep.
Those things. And yeah, I try to stay away from most things processed. I do add a lot of nuts and seeds to things. I eat a ton of vegetables, and then lots of sardines and chicken. I don't enjoy red meat, so I don't really eat red meat. But yeah, just about every meal has a protein, a carb, and a fat in it, unless it's literally right after my workout, in which case it just has carbs and protein. Or if it is shortly before a workout, it might not have the protein and just have some carbs and fat. And yeah, eating a lot. That's pretty much what it looks like right now.
Food. Are you doing any fasted training right now, or is that a no-no when you're in the middle of Ironman training?
No, I was doing it for a little while, thinking just about so many like longevity benefits of it and seeing whether that would help get me into a place where I can better utilize fats as fuels. But I realized that it just wasn't serving me in terms of recovery. That there are definitely benefits to fasting when it comes to that longevity side. But I recognized that even if it was only zone 2, that it was probably impacting me to a negative degree more than it was to a positive degree. And it was just putting too much stress and strain on my system in terms of what I wanted to achieve. So for me, I'm eat first thing in the morning, and then no fasted training for me anymore.
What about ketones? Are you using any exogenous ketones with training at all? I'm just curious.
I'm not at the moment. No, I did play with it for a little bit. And I would say it did have a positive effect. Like I did notice that I did, I used it as like a recovery tool versus like actual training tool. So I know some people will take it beforehand, especially if they are otherwise doing fasted training, that really helps. But I was using it more as a post-workout recovery aid. Felt stronger, felt great, taste kind of gross. But I would say that I still feel that my biggest benefits just come from consistency with my meals and consistency with my yoga practice and consistency with sleep, that if those are not where they could be, that I'm not actually getting any shortcuts by simply adding exogenous ketones, and that's kind of still more of my focus is to just, I mean, I know that from somebody who hasn't spent a lot of time working on that consistency, I would appear to be very consistent. But when I look at my behaviors, I still see areas for optimization. And I just sort of think like there's still so much I can do at that basic level that I don't really need to add on the cherry on top.
Are there any supplements or nutrition hacks that you have sort of settled into over the years, or at least during the training for these events recently?
I mean, I would say that for me, I mean, I definitely need to stay on top of my electrolytes. Yeah. That's a big one. Magnesium. Need to take my magnesium at night. If I'm not taking magnesium at night, I'm not sleeping like I want to be sleeping, and I don't feel as recovered. So those are the two big ones. I think it took a little while for me to, when we think of nutrition hacks, finding out what it is that my body can tolerate as a pre-workout nutrition that you can take immediately before working out. So before my half Ironman event, like I've figured out that I can, I do really well with the Japanese style sweet potatoes and rice cakes with almond butter and eggs. And I know that some people are like, really? But that really well for me. But the other types of sweet potatoes actually make me feel just like crampy and just not great. So it has been a little bit of experimenting with that. I think it's just the differential fiber content of the Japanese sweet potato versus the other sweet potato.
Is the Japanese one, is that the white one or the purple one? I can't remember.
So that's the one that has the reddish skin and is white on the inside.
Those are good. They're a little starchier, yeah.
So they're like sugar. Okay. They're delicious. But other sort of like supplements, I mean, for me, I know that I'm somebody who definitely needs to take B12 supplements. In the past, I've always had indicators of having low B12 where doctors in the past before joining Wild Health would tell me, oh, you're obviously an alcoholic because of the shape of your blood cells, so you need to discontinue all of your alcohol consumption. And I mean, I don't drink. They say, reduce your alcohol to no more than 7 servings a week. And I was like, I haven't had 7 servings in 7 years. So that's obviously not it. So now that I know that it's B12 related, I'm pretty obsessive about that. And what else do I now do about nutrition? I think the other thing is differentiating between performance and performance nutrition versus health and daily nutrition, and where the overlap is. That in the past, I've tried to think of myself as, because I am a healthy individual, everything I eat has to be whole foods. Everything has to be cooked, prepared by me. Everything needs to be organic, clean, great nutrition, sugar-free. Can't possibly have more than 1 piece of fruit a day. That's way too much sugar. And that's where I came from. And that doesn't serve performance in fitness, where carbohydrates are energy. But that doesn't mean that that's not going to be the majority of how I eat. So my meals, for the most part, are home cooked, plain, simple, easy, nutritious, organic, whole foods. But then when I'm on my bike and I need to hit a zone 5 and I'm sprinting, like I've got booze, I've got sugar blocks, I've got all of that, and just sort of like allowing yourself to see the difference.
Yep.
You know, I'm not like, there is a time and a place for everything, and I think that a lot of times we become too orthodox about what is good and what is bad, and we label these foods. And I mean, I'm not saying that somebody should be grabbing candy bars just for the sake of it, but you are going to need that type of energy if you're trying to do something performance related, and that is going to have a negative impact on you if you're not using it. And it's not going to really be detrimental to your health in the context of high sugar need. You give your body sugar, like your body's using it. It's not just sitting there
immediately to fat. It's not,
so yeah,
your insulin levels aren't going super high.
Allowing myself to break down that, like there is crossover.
Yeah, this is something I mean, I see this a lot actually, and in a lot of my patients, amateur and even professional athletes. Like, I think the conversation around sugar bad is obviously come in the right direction for society, right? Like, to some extent, people are more aware that sugar is bad for you. But I think the challenge has been for a lot of people transitioning to understanding that there is a place for carbohydrates, especially around endurance activity. And while there's obviously some endurance athletes that are very capable of using fat as a primary food source and being keto, and it's not the majority. Like, the majority of humans are not built that way. Like, the majority of humans that I see, at least personally, do better, perform better if they're taking in a higher carbohydrate diet when they're burning that many calories and doing that much endurance activity. So I suspect I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing this was a bit of a challenge for you, transitioning from a CrossFit style, lifestyle where it's like, paleo and steaks and like, keto, and like anybody eats a carbohydrate, like it's, kicked out of the gym. Right. So I suspect this was a really challenging transition for you, like moving into a sport that is endurance based, where you really have to eat carbs or you're going to die, like you're not going to survive.
I mean, I really somehow thought that I was going to be above that. And coming from the CrossFit background, I was like, well, and I mean, to a degree, endurance sports have been around for a lot longer than CrossFit has been around. So I was coming into this endurance world sort of thinking that I was surrounded by people with like old school thought, that all of the people in endurance were still just kind of following outdated, recommendations. They were doing all this like carbo loading and like, what is that? And I really thought that I could be an endurance athlete and perform well living off salads and fish. And I mean, I think that then also when I now say that I eat a lot of carbohydrates, the majority of my carbohydrates are vegetables. Like, you can get a lot from vegetables. Like, it's not like I'm there pounding white rice or, living off like gluten-free bagels or anything like that. Like, the majority is still carbohydrates. But yeah, coming from the CrossFit world, I definitely thought that somehow I could not fall victim to this world of high carb.
I'm above this. I don't need your carbohydrates.
It didn't work well.
Yeah, right. Okay, never mind. Change my mind.
Although it is funny, I've had people ask me about nutrition and, different sort of like, what do I recommend that they take as an endurance athlete, like during their sessions or during their races. And I mean, this is where we're talking about high intensity. Like, we're not talking about I'm going on a 2-hour zone 2 bike ride. Like there, I mean, I don't know, take a banana if you want to, but like, you'll be fine. Right. And just drink lots of water. But for the high intensity stuff, where people will ask me, do you know of any sugar-free gels? And it's sort of like,
nope.
It's kind of, let's go back to why you're asking me the question. Let's go back to, why do we want a gel? why do we not want sugar? Is there, like, where is the disconnect? And I think that that's just where it is a reflection of how much, how we are inundated with messaging around nutrition in general, and the words of good and bad and what you do and what you don't need. And like, oh, if you do a certain amount of intensity, you need your intra-workout nutrition. And then at the same time, we get told, well, whatever you do, don't ever touch sugar. Like, that's the worst thing you can do to yourself. So now it's like, okay, I need nutrition while I work out that is going to improve my performance, but it has to be sugar-free. And we sort of get to that point where it's like, do you need sugar? Well, what is your goal? Why are you doing this? Why are you working out? Maybe, maybe not. And so I do find it a very, very interesting world, especially coming from a world where you're working out for 8 minutes. Like, you don't
need a Gatorade. Gatorade is not
pounding.
What you need.
Yeah, like, so from the CrossFit world of like 8-minute workouts, like you really don't need that stuff, versus being in a world where it's like, oh, you're at threshold for 3, 5, whatever hours. You need something. So it has been an interesting transition.
Sure. Speaking of all this sugar, tell us, what's your guiltiest pleasure? What do you enjoy imbibing in?
Well, I really like chocolate. And there's like the Lindt dark chocolate. There's like Lindt dark chocolate balls. Really, really love those. The other chocolate that I really love is from Trader Joe's. They have those dark chocolate truffles. So that's something that I go through my phase as well. Have that like every single day. So I would say that's the thing that I enjoy the most. Something else that I really like, but I know it's going to make me feel sick, and that's almost why I like it even more, is because I know that I can't have it every day. And most people wouldn't even think of this as a treat at all, but is sort of like chocolate granola with Greek yogurt. That is especially if it's like vanilla Greek yogurt with chocolate chip granola, is absolutely delicious. And I will most definitely have more than like one serving size. I mean, what's the serving size?
Awesome.
Like that, or like Purely Elizabeth, granola. All of these things are, not unhealthy, but not necessarily the best for us. So I feel you on the
Purely Elizabeth. That is that stuff's amazing. I also agree. I can't have just one serving. Whatever one serving is, 1/3 of a cup or whatever joke serving size they're talking about.
Yeah, like that. Can we just fill the bag of serving? That would be great.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about how you take care of your mental health.
Other than working out? No, I'm kidding. No, I would. I mean, like, really, my workouts are partially mental health as well. There is no better place to just be in, whether you call it the zone or call it your flow or call it a place of reflection, especially if I'm sort of swimming. Somehow when I'm swimming and you're just counting laps, counting strokes, counting breath, that keeps me really centered. So that is part of my mental health, is right there. But the other thing is my going to yoga. I like to do the really relaxing and calming yoga where for the first 10 minutes, we just focus on breathing. So that's become something that I like to do 4 days a week now. And then in the evenings, I like to just sit in absolute silence with my Hypervolt and just have that time that I am switched off. The other thing that has taken me a while to commit to is that after 8 p.m., ideally 7 p.m., but after 8 p.m., like my computer is just like, I don't have a computer. I don't have a computer. I don't have email. It's gone. Whatever happens after 8 p.m. can happen tomorrow, because I will see something that I want to get done. So once that computer is closed, done, in my bag, like, I will not take it out again until the next day.
Good for you. That's super important, when like actually disconnecting from work is so important, and from devices in general. But what would your patients be surprised to know about you?
I think that I was always active, but I never saw myself as an athlete until I was like 23, I think. So all of growing up, I was not an athlete. That was not part of my identity at all. That only happened after I started doing CrossFit, and suddenly discovered that CrossFit wasn't just like CrossFitness at one little gym that I happened to be a member of, but it was actually a thing that people did, and people had competitions, and it was really cool. And I joined in the scale division, and won by a landslide. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm good at this stuff. And other people started to call me an athlete. And that's the first time that I saw myself as an athlete. Growing up, like, I was an artist, I was an academic, I was really good at a lot of other stuff. But I mean, nobody in my world really valued fitness or workouts or anything. So it didn't matter that I did a lot of sports, because like, it was just what you did because you, I don't know, like, my parents were working. They were both not going to be at home. So I had to be entertained somewhere and somehow until 6 p.m. So I just engaged in like the activity that was going to take over my time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We all seem to come to this at our own time, you know, and that doesn't mean that we've been athletes our entire lives. We can certainly find that later in life, which is kind of awesome, that you can just like sort of realize like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm an athlete too. I'm actually good at this stuff, and then take on kind of that new identity. It's a lot of fun. Awesome. Well, Lara, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a great opportunity, I think, to get to know you a little bit better, allow our listeners to get to know you a little bit better, and then your patients, I'm sure, are going to really love this podcast. So thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. So thank you for having me here.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.